Okay, everybody, module 6. Module 6 is a two-component module as well as most of, as all these have been, I guess. This one is actually the first part. It's a 5 subtopic area, or 5, I shouldn't say sub 5 topic module, okay, dealing with the ethical leadership and the ethical component, and then finishing up with team structure within the leadership format, okay? So with that said, let's get started on. We talked a little bit about the ethical side already, ethical leadership. We're going to focus a little more, especially on module 6.1 here. We're going to look at Kohlberg's stages of moral development, which is the foundational component of how ethical decision making, ethical thought, ethical leadership is founded. Okay, where it originates from. We talk about leadership ethics. Let's do a little explanation on a description and kind of go over the definitional component. Okay, obviously ethics, the component, is derived from a Greek word, which a lot of stuff you'll notice is, ethos, meaning customs, conduct, character, how you conduct yourself in that larger group. And it's concerned with the kinds of values and morals that individuals or the larger society have in relation to what's considered appropriate or inappropriate. And obviously those ethical values have changed over time. I mean, all we have to do is look at the United States, and if you go back to the 1700s, 1800s, if you were 15 or 16 years old, female and not married, something was wrong. Now today we would say what? But back in that time frame, obviously, you didn't live very long. Life was hard. I mean, you needed to get out and get going, and people got married very, very early, where now it gets later and later and later, obviously. We have a different ethical belief in relation to those basic things, okay? That's just something as simple as getting married, right? And it focuses on the virtuousness of the individual and then the motives for them being, facilitating exactly why they make the decisions they make, and are those decisions virtuous, or are they evil, are they unacceptable in society? Okay, and then we're going to look at this obviously from a leadership perspective. Okay, I'm going to go over this in a minute, piece by piece with you. This is out of Northhouse's text, and basically we look at 3 different levels. Okay, level 1 is the pre-conventional morality. Then there are 2 stages, stage 1 and stage 2, and I'm going to go through each one of these individually. Okay, level 2 is your conventional morality, and then the stage 3 and stage 4. Okay, and then level 3 is the whole post-conventional morality. Okay, which is level 5 and 6, which I'm going to break down each one of these levels. Just keep in mind, we talk about level 1. Okay, talk about this pre-conventional morality. This is the reasoning based on the self-interest, avoiding punishment, reward. It's very transactional. Okay, very much, not to use an overused colloquial term, carrot and stick kind of approach. Okay, level stage 2, the conventional morality. This is reasoning based on what society establishes as acceptable. Okay, you could bring in something just in my lifetime, gay marriage. Back in the 80s when I was in high school, in grade school, I guess grade school, junior high, and high school during that time frame, you never heard about it. It didn't exist. I mean, it wasn't legal anywhere. It wasn't acceptable anywhere. It just didn't exist, right? Well, that component didn't exist. Did the underlying part? Yeah, that existed going back into antiquity. Okay, and then level 3 is that post-conventional morality. This is reasoning based on conscious and creating what would be considered a just society. Maybe not a utopia, but at least a society where, and I'll get into it here in a minute here, okay, you start getting into what is termed rights and what is right within that larger construct. So let's go through each one of these levels and stages of Kohlberg's stage of moral development. And obviously, we've talked about level 1, that pre-conventional morality. Well, let's look at stage 1. Stage 1 is obedience and punishment. Okay, at this particular stage, rules are fixed and handed down by authority. It's very transactional. It's very donatological, which we'll talk about a little bit later. It's very rules-based, very duty-based. Okay, it's a strong focus on right and wrong. All right. Stage 2, you've got individualism and exchange. An act is right if it serves the individual. Okay. A little bit of ego, a little bit of egotism to it, a little bit of self-serving component, where in stage 2, okay, if it serves the individual, if it serves you, then the actions you made were right. All right. Level 2, as we move down, is conventional morality. And stage 3 is interpersonal accord and conformity, where you conform to the expectations of the larger society. Maybe even something peer related here, where you'll conform to what's acceptable to the group. Okay, those expectations will facilitate your stages of development. Okay, or the larger society, a speeding kind of thing. You can say, well, that may be obedient punishment, and it could be, but drunk driving, that's not acceptable. You conform to the expectations of others. Therefore, if you do it, it's unethical within the larger society. Okay, stage 4 is maintaining the social order. Now we're talking about moral decisions show concern for society as a whole. What's good for the collective? Okay, is this something that's good? You may say, well, what do you mean by that? Okay, how about a federal government safety net? Okay, with Medicaid and food stamps and all that kind of things. Okay, we are a rugged individualistic culture where people earn what they get. So anything related to that social order, that safety net, moral decisions, you're showing concern for society. We take money from those who produce and we give it to those who don't. That's a social safety net, guys. The government's a pass-through entity. It prints cash, disseminates it in society through what? Well, working. Okay, companies. They pay you. The government takes your money and gives it to somebody else to facilitate some moral good, making sure that everybody has insurance, everybody has food on the table, even if they aren't working. Okay, and then stage 3 is that post-conventional morality. Okay, I'm sorry, level 3. Stage 5 is the social contract and individual rights. Okay, now you've got moral decisions based on what a good society should be like, where we want to be in the future, decisions that are made today in relation to facilitating an outcome that we are looking for. Okay, you could say, well, what could that possibly be? Well, think about something like this. All right, increase taxes exponentially on gasoline. Therefore, you're hoping to push people away from the combustion engine to electric cars because it's good for society, because it lowers CO2s, assuming that the electricity being produced isn't being made with the same fossil fuels, such as coal or whatever it might be, or heating oil. All right. If it's made with nuclear, there's of course you have byproduct there too, but it's made with nuclear, therefore it emits no CO2 into the atmosphere. In relation to that, therefore, it's a moral decision by the government to make it very expensive for you to drive a car that has a combustion engine to get you to have a car that has an electric. All right. Stage 6 is what we call universal principles. These are moral decisions based on internalized universal principle of justice that applies to everyone. Okay. On the negative side, you could say, well, it'd be something like mala and say, it's the opposite of what we know to be wrong. This is what we know to be right. Okay. Things that that everybody can agree on are things we should be doing. Okay. What could that be? Okay. How about Medicare? Okay. You want to make sure that people over the age of 65 who aren't working anymore, they have health insurance, when they can go see the doctor and get their prescriptions if they need them. Fine. So they can live a long life. All right. I mean, the goal, and it kind of was the goal at the beginning, is very few people probably, you at 65 or 62, I guess back then, you're probably not going to live too much longer. Right. And as people were living into their 80s and 90s and 100, all right, you're talking up to what, 30 some years of drawing Social Security? A lot of people didn't even pay in that amount of time, let alone, and the money they're taking out is way more than the amount they paid in. Okay. But that's a universal principle. We have to make sure that there's a safety net for the over 65 group, that kind of argument. Okay. So those are the different stages of going through the model there, going through Kohlberg stages of moral development, how we develop through different stages to establish our ethical philosophies. Our ethical leadership, or as I got here, the ethical theory itself. What does it do? It provides a system of rules and principles that guide that decision making, okay, about what is right or wrong, good or bad, because those words sometimes get interchangeable, and they probably shouldn't be, okay, because something that might be right may not be good. It might be bad, but it's the right thing to do. And something that may be wrong, it could be good for some people, right? So it gets a little convoluted in relation to that. So I kind of put up there, and there's the two separate entities, right and wrong, good and bad. They're not the exact same thing. And it provides a basis for understanding what it means to be a morally decent human being. Okay. Now, are there some people that are not morally decent? Yeah, there's a lot of people out there that aren't. Obviously, you see, sometimes you see them in the news exponentially, all over the place. People doing things that are just like that. That's not right. Okay, that's not a morally decent. Somebody who has morals and is decent wouldn't do that. Therefore, how can that happen? And we have a problem sometimes correlating those parts of behavior in the larger confines. So when we talk about ethical theories, we're going to break it down in two broad domains. Okay, ethical theory leads us to ethical leadership. All right, and those are things based on the leader's character and conduct. Now, conduct is the big one. You'll notice I pulled this out of Northhouse's text 2 over to the right here. Conduct is the big one. If you look at character, we're just going to look at virtue-based, and we'll talk about it here in a minute. But with conduct, we've got two different areas. Okay, we have the consequence-based, or what are called the teleological theories, and that's ethical egoism and utilitarianism, which I'll discuss here in a minute. And then we've got the second component, which is deontological theories, being deon, which means duty in Greek. Okay, and then we'll look at the character or the virtue-based theories in relation to ethics. We talk about ethical egoism. Okay, now let's get most people have an idea what the ego is and being egotistical. I'm sure people have heard that phrase before, either said to you, you said about somebody else, or just in general. Okay, but what is ethical egoism? Well, it states that an individual is morally obligated to perform some action if and only if that action maximizes the individual's self-interest. If this is in your best interest, you do it. If it's not, you don't have to. Okay. If something isn't in your best interest, you don't really have to do it. Everyone will be better off if each person does what's in his or her own best interest. Now, this sounds almost counterintuitive to servant leadership or even authentic leadership. And it is. It can be. All right. Depend upon what you believe is in your best interest. Now, best interest, you'd say, well, okay, you do something at work to help you get a promotion, even though short term you don't get anything. Okay, so really that's in the best interest of the organization that you do something above and beyond. Yeah, but you can see long term it's in your best interest because you show that you can go, do more work, go above and beyond. Okay, the fact that ethical egoism is collectively self-defeating does not mean that it's wrong. Right? And it is. What's in your best interest may be to, for you to win, somebody's got to lose. All right. I kind of put up here, an ethical egotist might still maintain that it's right for each person to pursue his or her own interest, even if it would bring about a worse consequence for everybody else that's out there. Okay. As long as it is in your best interest, you should do it. Okay. Because it serves your greater good. Utilitarianism is a word that I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people have heard it before. Okay. It's kind of the old Vulcan kind of way. It's a Star Trek reference. Doing the most good for the most people. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one, okay, or the few. This is the theory of morality that advocates actions that foster happiness or pleasure to the greatest amount of people in society, the organization, whatever it is, okay, and opposes action that causes unhappiness or harm to a large section of society. Okay, now, mostly we focus on do the greatest good for the most amount of people, because that's usually the way it is. When you do things, you do it for good. You're not trying to do things to cause harm. Okay, but that is a secondary part of it. All right, and that kind of paper, when directed towards social, economic, and political decisions, that philosophy will aim for the betterment of society as a whole. What's good for the collective? It might be bad for the individual. It may be bad for you, but it's what's good for the collective. Okay, and there are three principles that serve as the foundation for this. One, pleasure or happiness is the only thing that truly has intrinsic value. All right, internalized value. Well, if you look at it too, we talk about consumption with the GDP. We measure that based upon what? Utility, the amount of pleasure an individual derives from that, whatever it is, buying the food, buying those clothes, the utilization of them, whatever it might be. Actions are right as long as they promote happiness, and the only wrong is that if they produce unhappiness. So as long as those actions produce happiness for the larger good, okay, ethically you do it. And everyone's happiness counts equally. There's no weighted mean here. Every individual one, if 51 out of 100 say you do X, it'll make them very happy, and then it's in their favor, and 49 say make them very unhappy, you do it. Okay, because you're doing the most good for the most amount of people, all right, in relation to your 100 people you're looking at there. Donatological is an ethical theory that says actions are good or bad according to whatever the rules that are established under which those actions take place. Okay, it comes from the Greek word mean dion, or duty. Okay, keep in mind these actions that align with the rules are ethical, while actions that don't align with the rules are unethical. Federal law. Okay, where do we start with the foundational ethical student workers handbook? Federal law. It's always a good place to start. That's the foundation. Why? Because that helps to, number one, protects you from legal aspects, obviously. Right? But it's also a good foundational start based on what's right or wrong or acceptable within society. There are two different kinds of ethical duties. There are perfect duties, which basically they're inflexible. Okay, and I kind of gave a weird kind, not weird, but a kind of very definitive example. You know, do not kill innocent individuals. All right. You'd say, well, that's just wrong. That's correct. That's a donatological component. Now, that's not been true throughout history, needless to say. Okay, if you look back at human history, there's a lot of times that the killing of innocents haven't been considered wrong in a society. Okay, and it is either you kill an innocent person or you don't. There's no middle ground. It's either a yes or no. Okay, there's no possibility in there. There's no wavering. And then imperfect duties do allow for some middle ground from an ethical standpoint. And here we're talking about focus on self-improvement or aid to others. There's no specific right or wrong answer. Okay, how much you commit to imperfect duties is up to you. How much aid, how much you want to help somebody else, how much you want to facilitate something on your own self-improvement. It's up to you. There is no right or wrong answer. How much education should you have? Okay, should you give up to get a master's degree, it's going to take you 2 years. Should you give up 2 years of doing other things with that capital and with your time to do this? There's not a right or wrong answer to that from an ethical standpoint, because society doesn't say that's a bad thing to do. You shouldn't get more education. No, it doesn't say that. Okay, so it kind of becomes more open-ended. Virtue-based is on the other side here, obviously, and this is more like I said here, it's person-based rather than actions. You're talking about the individual and not the behavior that you can measure. Okay, it looks at the virtue or the moral character of the person who's facilitating or carrying out whatever that action is. Okay, rather than the duties and the rules. Right? Can a good person do a bad thing? Yes. Can a bad person do a good thing? Yes. Okay, you're looking at the person, not really the actions of that person. Now, good or bad too is open-ended. I get that. Okay, you can interpret that any way you want. Okay, and it is virtue ethics not only deal with the rights, what's right or wrong of the individual's act, but it also provides guidance as to the sort of characters and behaviors a good person will seek to achieve. Okay, it's not only looking at what's right or wrong in relation to the outcome, right? But it's also looking at what is the guide, what's the foundation, what kind of characteristics. Okay, somebody had to do something that society says, well, that might not be right. Okay, but it had to be done. All right, the environment put the individual into that position where there was no other choice. I kind of put it in that way. Virtue ethics is concerned with the whole of the person's life rather than any one moment in time. That's why I kind of said, can a good person sometimes do a bad thing? Okay, you say, well, yeah, they can. Okay, well, did they do that bad thing because they are bad or because they had no choice? Or maybe, you know what? Maybe it was just an accident. Okay, there was no intent. There was no malice involved in it. It just happened. Okay, I pulled this out of the book just because I thought it helped you kind of wrap this first subtopic area together. Okay, if we're looking on a 3x3 here, All right. We got concern for interest of others on the X, and then we've got concern for self-interest on the Y. If you look at utilitarian way out here, okay, somebody who has a high concern for what? Well, for others, and a very low concern for self-interest, kind of the Mother Teresa, okay, of the world here. Utilitarian kind of fits right in the middle. You got a middle concern for others, but you also do for yourself as well. Okay. And then ethical egoism is way up here where you really got a low concern for others and a very high concern for your own self-interest. All right. And it's not, sometimes say that kind of sounds bad. Well, sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. Okay. Just like on the airplane, when they tell you if the airplane decompresses, put the mask on yourself before you help anybody else. All right. Yes, you're going to take care of yourself first. Okay. Then you can slide down here basically to altruism and start taking care of others sitting around you, getting their masks on so they get oxygen, kind of thing. Okay. But you've got to, in an organizational structure, you've got to protect the good of the company. And sometimes that protecting the good of the company may come to a detriment to somebody else. All right. Okay, hold on.